Good morning, everyone. It's Friday. And we have a nice selection of bills this morning that we're going to walk through that have come over from other committees and some bill introductions. And then we're going to do another bill after lunch today.
At 1.
At 1, which is on the agenda. And so some of them have a lot more sort of fiscal detail and relevance than others. And so be mindful of if these are bills that you feel like we need a lot more testimony on, please, say the word, but some of them we might just be sort of running through and voting out today. So with that and everyone settled into their chairs on this delightful Friday rainy morning with many pressure systems changing in the sky, Mr. Novogrodsky,
That is perfect.
the floor is yours. Tell us about H-175.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair Kornheiser. My name is Ben Novogrodsky from the Office of Legislative Counsel. H-175 was voted favorably out of the Committee on Judiciary and I did a brief overview for House Human Services just to give them a sense of things that's sort of in their subject area. But H-175 is really more of a bill to update what is now known as the Children and Family Council for Prevention Programs to align more with updates in federal law as far as program requirements, federal appropriations to acquire grants. So it's changing its role a little bit. It will now be called the Council for Equitable Youth Justice. It works with DCF to essentially better and otherwise improve the juvenile justice system. The bill updates the further delineates council membership requirements. It brings the current council up from 21 to up to 25 members, so it doesn't necessarily have to have 25. Some more detail about how to fill vacancies, definitions, quorum requirements, but those don't really change in substance. They're just more clearly delineated. It changes the duties and responsibilities of the council to align with the federal governing law. So, for instance, compliance monitoring with the deinstitutionalization of status offenders, separation of juveniles from incarcerated adults, the removal of juveniles from adult jails and lockups, efforts to reduce racial and ethnic disparities within the juvenile justice system. And so those are really the core requirements that the council is responsible for. In addition to some reporting requirements, they have to create a plan and use data-driven systems in the development of that plan. It has to be updated periodically every other year. There are also a couple repeals of sections of the law that the federal law doesn't require anymore. And that's really the high-level overview of what the bill does. I suspect that the reason why it's before the committee today is maybe concerns over per diems and compensation. However, Judge Davenport, who is the vice chair of the council, testified that they can spend up to 5% of their federal grant on per diems. However, most of the members decline the per diem, and it's really used mostly for the youth members that are on the council, because part of the council's job is to include youth and family voices that have encountered the system. And so it's a way to sort of incentivize those youth members to participate. Any remaining amount is usually spent on sending those youth members to national conferences in DC that concern juvenile justice initiatives and developments across the country. But other than that, I suspect that any fiscal implication would probably be minimal.
And we have a fiscal note that
Okay.
go through, so.
So I'm happy to answer any questions about the details of the bill or anything else.
Is there any language that you're aware of in the bill that has any fees or taxes in it?
No. Yeah, everything is really managed. Truth be told, I was a little perplexed coming in as to why, but it's really all administered through a federal grant. And there are compensation requirements through that the state can provide, but based on Judge Davenport's testimony, it seems like it's really the federal grant that supports those per diems.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions? Yeah.
Page 3, line 8. Council shall elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary or treasurer. They don't need both.
Yeah, that was a request of the committee. There's no requirement on the federal law to have certain officers. I think it was just more of a organizational point for the committee or for the council.
Okay. Same page, line 18. I'm just not sure how that reads. The council shall act only by vote of a majority of its members and voting at a meeting at which a quorum. A majority of its members voting, or and the ands messes me up, but see what I mean?
Yeah, the intent of the language is just that there must be a quorum, and then official acts only occur when there's a majority of the members present at the meeting.
Yeah, okay. Small point.
I think with that, thank you. If you could hang out for just a minute and hear from Anna at Joint Fiscal, that would be great.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So before I start, I'm going to point out an egregious math error that I made in my fiscal note, where at the bottom, I said that the impact of increasing membership of the council by 3 members is net eligible. It's 4 members. So very, very egregious math error. I apologize, but I wanted to point that out, and I'll fix it and send a new copy to Sorsha. So I think, and for the record, Dan Dickerson, Joint Fiscal, I think the reason, or my suspicion of the reason why this bill is here is that the bill as introduced had some language relating to a children's trust fund. And it was striking that language, but there's a reporting requirement where the director of the trust fund would have to send an annual report of revenues and expenses to the tax department, because you guys manage the tax department. That might have been why it ended up here. And I think until the bill is formally replaced with the judiciary amendment on the floor, that as introduced bill is what sort of what exists, I guess.
But this bill doesn't do anything to change the Children's Trust Fund language at all.
It doesn't now, or I didn't see any language like that now.
Okay.
So yeah, I think you've heard about how the council is funded. They receive funds from the federal government through the Juvenile Justice Reform Act each year. That's an allocation, and they're able to, the council and DCF, who's sort of the umbrella over them, get to use 5%, up to 5% of that allocation to manage the council itself. So it's all federally funded. I received an email from DCF confirming that they never actually used the whole 5% each year. And so they end up using some funding to send council members to like conferences and other professional events. So they don't anticipate that adding those members is going to drive them to a point where they would have to supplement any other funding. You know, they could continue to use federal funds as they currently do. So I don't think there's a fiscal impact to this bill.
Thank you for your detective work about the underlying bill, or the original bill. It's not really the underlying bill. Thank you. Yeah, Representative Benton.
Thank you. As you probably know, consistent with this proposal, the Institutions Committee is worrying over how to separate adults and juveniles physically. And that's one of the aims here. Can you tell me, is the grant limited to supporting the council, or can unused funds essentially go in furtherance, if you will, of state initiatives to plan for separation physically?
I can't speak specifically to how the entirety of the grant funds can be used. I do know that the 5% is sort of required to be applied to managing this council. And that's why, if they don't use it for the meetings, they use it to send council members off.
Okay.
But the rest, I can't speak to,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Want a motion?
Um,
We're ready for a motion? Or not?
so are there any other hands up?
I can.
Oh, you have your hand up.
I could probably
I couldn't
answer
understand what
a couple of
Carl
the concerns. So the Children's Trust Fund that was originally in the bill, that was a drafting error on my part because that was repealed last year when I drafted the bill.
That's what I thought.
Hadn't actually gone into effect, so.
Thank you.
That's why the amendment removes that provision. And then as far as Representative Anthony's question, the council's responsible really for managing those funds. It can go to the development of the plan itself, but part of the grant is contingent on compliance with certain separations, to your point. And so the grant can actually be reduced if there are a certain number of violations of those core requirements. And that's just sort of the reality of the system. I think that there are efforts always to be compliant, but there are certain situations, especially given the status of juveniles in the state right now and sort of a lack of a secure facility to be compliant, in spite of best efforts to do so.
Thank you.
Madam
Sir,
Chair, I
yes.
We move the bill out as we received it.
Second.
Representative Maslin made the motion. Representative Anthony seconded. Is there any discussion? If you could call the roll.
Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demrow,
Yes.
Maslin.
Yep.
Mattos,
Yes.
Bodie,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes.
Kornheiser.
Yes,
12-0-0.
thank you.
May the record show, glad to see Chris back today.
Yes.
Thank you.
everyone. Representative Maslin, will you report the bill?
Sure. Pretty difficult, but yeah, I need something to do, right?
Thank you. Okay,
Okay, do not say anything after the roll.
we will see everyone at, after